Alice. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And if other folks pop in, well, we'll see them when they get here. All right, so today I'm going to use a blanket and 2 blocks. You're welcome to use such things if you would like. And for today's class, let's get started in a comfortable seated position as we get ready to just settle in and soothe our nervous systems a little bit after what I am sure has been a very hectic week for everybody. So let's just begin by settling into our seats, maybe wiggling around. Oh, I don't know why Zoom is giving me a thumbs down. I'd rather give you a thumbs up. We'll wiggle around and get comfortable here. Finding a seated position that feels good. Maybe that's cross-legged. You might like to stretch those legs out long in front of you, or straddle seat, or even sit in a chair. So on a cushion, just finding whatever feels good for your body today. And from there, we'll draw the spine up long and really start to invite our awareness right into the body using the breath as a portal. So inhaling and really feeling the air expand the lungs, the belly. And then slowly exhaling, feeling the belly and the lungs contract. And then again, breathing deeply in, chest and belly expand. Can you think about sending the breath down into the bottom of your lungs? And then gently letting that breath go, slowly letting the lungs contract. And then one more time, breathing deeply in. Maybe this time you can send the breath even deeper than the bottom of the lungs, or at least imagine you could, down to the belly button, maybe down past the belly button. And then exhaling completely. Nice. And from here, let's begin to gently awaken and move the body, bringing one ear to one shoulder and another ear, the other ear to the other shoulder. Maybe dropping the chin to the chest and taking a few gentle neck rolls, one direction and the other. Just starting to move the body gently, kindly, lovingly, with gratitude for all it does to support us. Maybe taking some nice shoulder rolls in one direction, feeling any sticky spots you might notice, and then going the other direction with those shoulder rolls. Just getting the body moving through the upper spine, the upper back, and then we'll let that go. Taking any movements that feel natural or needed in the body right now. And of course, feeling free to always move in the way that feels most supportive for your body. All right, so let's also just take a minute to roll out the wrists. These parts of our bodies that do so much for us. And then reversing that direction, circling in the other direction. I feel like our wrists don't get a lot of love, so it's nice to just pay a little attention to them here. Okay. Doing any other movements that feel good for you right now. And then we'll move into the side body, start opening up through the side body. So let's start by inhaling, arms up over the head, thinking about growing the spine long, lengthening from the tip of the head all the way down to the bottom of the tail. And then we'll slowly drop one hand, maybe the left hand, to the mat outside of our hip and reach that opposite arm, maybe the right arm, up and over. Thinking about keeping that opposite hip heavy so that both hips are heavy on the ground and the opening is really coming through the side body, through the outer hip, the PQL that gets so tight up in this part of our abdomen, through the ribs that get really sticky, that spot under the armpit that gets a little bit tight there. Thinking about sending the breath into the side ribs there, really enhancing the opening. Nice. And then we'll inhale up through center, growing long once again. I saw the sun for a little bit today. I feel like a plant reaching for the sun desperately after all the rain we've been having. And then dropping the right or the other hand to the mat outside of that hip. And keeping both hips heavy on the mat, reaching the opposite arm, maybe the left arm up and over. And as you begin to open through this side of the body, really noticing how this side of the body feels. Often it's so different from one side to the other. Sometimes there's some good information for us in that. So again, keeping both hips heavy, really breathing into the side lung, the side ribs, enhancing that opening. Keeping the breath slow and deep. Nice. And then we'll come back through center, really reaching those fingertips towards the sky once more. And now as we exhale, can we bring the elbows down toward the ribs, like making goalposts or cactuses with our arms, thinking about squeezing the shoulder blades behind us so that we're opening through the chest. You might even tip the head back and look back behind you just the tiniest bit to enhance this mini back bend. Nice. And then let's counter that by reaching forward, maybe curling the spine forward a little bit to open up between the shoulder blades. Nice. And then we'll roll up to a seated position once more. From here, we'll bring the left hand to the outside of the right knee, or a hand to the outside of the opposite knee. And then let's place the other fingertips on the floor sort of as a kickstand, or you can always bring that hand to the hip if that feels better. From here, inhaling the spine long before we turn to gently look over that right shoulder. Pardon me. Thinking about lengthening the spine with every inhale and ever so gently deepening the twist with the exhale. Really staying connected with our breath. Letting our breath sort of be our barometer for our practice. Anytime the breath starts to become labored or difficult, that's often a message that we're pushing past an edge in our practice. And sometimes that's what we want, but not today. So if you find that, please back out just the tiniest bit and let your nervous system relax. That's the goal here. All right, we'll come through center. Do any little wiggly movements or anything that would feel good before we move over to the second side. And then we'll take that second side. So right hand or other hand to the outside of the opposite knee or thigh. And then we'll use those fingertips as a nice little kickstand, assisting us in really lengthening through the spine as we inhale before exhaling gently into our twist. Thinking about really lengthening through the spine on that inhale as we inhale deeply into the bottom of our lungs and gently, ever so gently, twisting on the exhale. We're just using our hands to support the length of the spine here, rather than using our arm strength to sort of crank the spine into a twist. We want the twist to unfold from the spine itself as much as it can. Nice. And then we'll let that go. Maybe do a few wiggles here, shake it out a little bit. And then we're going to move into sort of a modified side plank to continue opening up through our side body just a little bit here. I feel like during the winter we do a lot of like, you know, warming ourselves up. So it's nice when it starts to spring to open up through the parts of the body that get so sticky. So in this modified side plank, we're going to keep our hips on the mat, sort of stack knee on top of knee, foot on top of foot, and then we'll just walk this arm out on our mat until it's far out enough that we can drop down to the forearm. So we've just got our torso off of the mat here. Our body is fully supported by both the forearm and the legs on the mat. And from here, let's inhale the free arm, the top arm, up and over, thinking about sort of arching up and over as though you could reach this hand toward the mat, toward your hand that's on the mat. I'm not saying do that. Just imagine that your fingers were long enough to make that happen. As you breathe into the side body, into the side of the lungs. And from here, continuing to reach through the fingertips, let's turn the torso so that it is facing down toward the mat, reaching through the fingertips still. So we're just getting a little bit more into the side back body here as we reach the fingertips. And then coming back toward our starting position, sort of in this lateral plane, reaching the fingertips, reaching. And then we'll let that go and press up and switch to the other side as we continue to unstick our ribs just a little bit. So finding our modified side plank on the second side, hips are on the ground, hand is on the ground, knee stacked on top of knee, foot stacked on top of foot, and then we'll just walk that front hand out until we can drop down onto the forearm. And sweep that top arm up and over, really opening again through the side body. Thinking about making a little bit of an arch here, a little bit of a rainbow maybe, as though you could bring the fingertips of the top hand down to the fingertips of the bottom hand. Feeling the opening through the side body, reaching those fingertips. And then as you continue to reach the fingertips, turning that shoulder, the torso, to face toward the mat as you reach out toward the front of the mat with those fingertips. And then returning toward our starting position, making that rainbow once more. And we're going to press up so that we're now in this sort of side-seated position. And from here, we're just going to move onto all fours. So if you tend to have tender knees like me, you might like to use a blanket or a towel to pad the knees here for a moment. And if you have rock star knees, well, more power to you. Okay, so in our all fours, let's find our hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips, taking any movements that feel needed, natural, good for your body here as we sort of explore a new orientation. And then we'll think about, in this tabletop position, lengthening our spine as much as we can. So once again, thinking about finding that lengthen the spine from the tip of the head to the bottom of the tail. Just a little natural, gentle traction on the spine here. Lengthening and lengthening. Nice. And from here, we'll continue working through the spine with a little cat-cow. So tipping the tail up toward the ceiling, looking up toward the ceiling and dropping the belly, inhaling for cow. And then tucking the tail, tucking the chin, doming up through the shoulder blades as you arch the spine for cat. Inhaling, dropping the belly, chest opens, looking up, cow. And exhaling, cat, tucking chin, tucking tail, doming up through the shoulder blades. And one last time, let's tip the tail up, look up, drop the belly, open the heart. And one last time, let's arch the spine, tuck the tail, tuck the chin. And let that go for just a moment. And if there are any other movements that feel like they would be nice for your body, please feel free, of course, to take those at this time. From here, let's take the left hand, or any hand really, and what we're going to do is we're going to thread that hand behind the planted wrist for a little thread the needle situation here. And as we thread that needle, we'll bring our shoulder and our temple toward the mat, and then maybe lean away from that hand to get a little additional traction, sort of a pin and stretch underneath the shoulder blade, continuing to open up through some of those sticky spots. And then pressing back up to all fours when you're ready. And we'll do that on the second side. So whichever hand you did not start with, let's take that hand and we're going to thread it behind the opposite wrist, bringing the shoulder, the temple to or toward the mat. If the mat seems really far away, this is a nice place to bring maybe a block underneath the head here. And then once you're down in a position that feels like your version, I invite you to explore maybe leaning a little bit to the right, leaning a little bit away from the outstretched hand to enhance the opening underneath your shoulder, underneath your shoulder blade. Reconnecting with the breath here, really thinking about sending the breath to the stickiest parts of your body, as though the oxygen molecules could really reach those areas directly from the breath. I know that's not how it works, but it can help us to imagine and soften just the littlest bit. All right, and from here, we'll come back to all fours. And then let's bring our toes to touch and our knees wide apart to make room for our torsos. And then begin to sit the hips back toward the heels for child's pose. You might like to place something between the heels and your hips for comfort and stability, if that would help in your posture. You might also enjoy having a block or something else beneath your forehead to lift the floor up a little bit to you as you reach those arms forward. Maybe wiggle the hips side to side a little bit. And let's spend a few cycles of breath here, really slowing down the breath. And once again, imagining that we could send the breath to or even past the bottom of the lungs, as though we could breathe all the way down beneath the belly button. Really connecting with that breath as you slow it down and give yourself permission to rest here for just a moment. Okay, let's begin to move out of that child's pose, pressing up, and then removing any props that you were using for this one. Actually, I'm gonna put my props up at the top of my mat so I have them in a moment when I might need them. And from here, coming back through tabletop for just a moment, simply to give us the space to step 1 foot forward so that we're in a low lunge. That back knee is still on the mat. And then let's bend and straighten this knee a few times. Hands can be inside, outside, on blocks. It's really a matter of preference and comfort in your body and in your practice today. It might change from day to day, of course. And after you've warmed up the knee joint a few times, let's kind of settle into this low lunge. You might wiggle from side to side a little bit. I find some dynamic movement at the beginning of these postures can really help open up my posture. So I like to do the wiggle. And then we settle in for a breath or two. And now let's sit the hips back, lengthen that leg, tip the toes back toward the face. This knee can be as bent as it needs to be for comfort. I brought my blocks with me because my hammies are real tight these days. So I'm relying on the support of my blocks to raise the floor up to me instead of trying to reach the floor, which would not be comfortable at this moment in time. So breathing into that back body, the back of that leg. And then we're going to come back forward into that low lunge and then walk that foot out to the edge of the mat and then turn it to a 45-degree angle here. Can't really see that. There we go. 45-degree angle. And we're going to move into lizard pose here. So you might like to stay up high on blocks. The idea is to sort of let this knee begin to fall open a little bit. We're not going to like violently press it out, but you know, you can use your elbow to give it a little bit of help. And if you would like to change the depth of this posture in terms of depth of sensation, you can always come down onto forearms, onto blocks, onto what have you. But again, we're not trying to find an edge in this class. So finding, you know, a version of the posture that feels relatively comfortable for just a couple of breaths here. As you breathe into the hips, sort of let things open, send some fresh, vital life force energy into some of these body parts that might need a little spring cleaning, metaphorically, of course. So sticking with that deep breath. Nice. And from here, let's ease out of that posture and bring ourselves back to a tabletop position. And from here, we're simply going to switch over to the other side and do the same sequence of postures. So stepping that other foot forward, you might pick up your own foot and give yourself a little assist, whatever it takes to get there, as many steps as it takes. So that back knee is still on the mat. And once we're here, we'll just bend and straighten that front knee a few times, lubricating the joints with synovial fluid as we move through all of these bigger joints in the body, the knees, the hips, the ankles. And then we'll settle into this low lunge here, letting the hips fall heavy forward. And again, really sending the breath, or imagining that we could send the breath into the tight areas that we're experiencing here. And if one side is feeling like particularly uncomfortable versus the other, I definitely invite you to utilize some props to give yourself the most comfortable version of the experience. Nice. And then we'll slip those hips back, flex the toes toward the face, lengthen that front leg for our hamstring stretch here. Again, the knee can be bent as much as it needs to be for comfort. Really breathing into the areas that feel tight, that feel tense. Nice. And then we'll come back into that low lunge in the front. And now we're going to take our lizard on side number 2, walking that foot out to the outer edge of the mat and then finding a nice 45-degree angle, letting the knee fall open a little bit here. And then finding your iteration, your version, your depth of the posture. maybe wiggling around a little bit. And then finding your stillness, sending the breath into the sticky parts. And we'll release that. Coming back through tabletop for just a second. And then moving aside any props that we've been using, we'll begin to make our way toward a forward fold. So stepping our feet forward, finding a little hip width version of our stance, and letting the spine be heavy, maybe swaying from side to side, maybe bending one knee and then the other. You might like to grab hold of opposite elbows and sort of sway. You might move the head around, get a little movement in the neck here. Letting your spine decompress for a moment. And then bringing the fingertips or the hands to the floor for a forward fold. And then rolling up to standing. One vertebra at a time. Getting nice and tall here. Growing tall through the spine. Pressing down through all four corners of the feet. And then inhaling the arms up to the sky. Up to the sky. Growing tall, 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 tall. And then from here, we'll take right hand to the left wrist and draw that arm up and over for a little half moon stretch here, continuing the theme of opening through the side body. And then inhaling up through center, we'll switch that grip, grab with the left hand, the right wrist, or just the other one, and come up and over. Breathing into that side body, letting it open. And coming back through center, reaching the arms up. And then let's take that cactus position with our arms one more time, drawing the elbows down toward the ribs, opening the heart, the chest. You might even like to tip the head back and deepen your back bend a little bit. And then we'll grow long in the spine once more. And gently roll down into our forward fold one more time. And from here, let's bring the hands to the shins and flatten our back, raising up halfway lift. And then coming back down to our forward fold. One more time, rolling all the way up to standing. Inhaling, arms up to the sky. And from here, let's turn and open the legs so we're long ways on our mat now. Toes are pointed out, reaching our arms out, really feeling the length of our body from fingertip to fingertip, from toes to toes, from the top of our head down to the bottom of our feet, taking up lots and lots of space here in this star pose. Breathing deeply in, really inhabiting the body from top to bottom, side to side, front to back. And then from here, we'll bring our hands to our hips, straighten out our feet so that they're facing forward. And now we'll begin to hinge forward from the hips, keeping the spine relatively straight as we bend forward into our wide-legged forward fold. This is a fantastic place for a couple of blocks here. And if being in a wide-legged forward fold in a standing position does not feel good, You can always consider taking this in a seated position. The effect is the same. And then slowly allowing the depth of your forward fold to go to a position, to a point that feels good. Hands can be on those blocks, they might be on the mat, they might be on the outside of the feet. Maybe you're super bendy and you've got like a very wide forward fold. Just doing whatever feels good for you. And now let's lift up halfway. And let's plant the left hand underneath the chest and sweep the right arm up and open. Nice little twist here. And then we'll replace. Right hand goes where the left hand was and sweep the left arm up and open. Might even turn to look up at that thumb if it feels good for your neck. Nice. And then coming back to the center one more time. And from here, let's walk around to the front of our mat. Step forward into our forward fold. Grasp opposite elbows and find ourselves in a ragdoll position. One more time. And from here, we'll make our way onto our backs in whatever fashion, method feels good for you. I'm just going to rearrange my props here. And once you're on your back on the mat, let's walk those feet out to the edges of the mat. So our feet are mat width apart. And then we'll gently begin to drop them from one side up and over to the other side. Your hands can be just resting on the mat beside you, or you might outstretch them, just feeling into what is working for you today. Dropping knees from side to side in this windshield wiping motion for a couple more rounds here. And the next time you come to the first side, the side you started with, let's stay on that side for a little spinal stretch. You can also consider bringing both knees stacked to get a little bit higher up into the spine with your twist. Not necessary though, just an option. You may like to outstretch the opposite arm, maybe even turn to look over that shoulder. And we'll gently release that. Come through center and drop knees to the second side. You might consider doing the same version of the twist on the side that you did on the first side. So if you stack knees for your twist, maybe do that on this side as well. You might like to outstretch that opposite arm, maybe turn to look over the shoulder. Really letting yourself soften into the twist here. We don't need to do a lot of work in this twist. We're letting gravity do the work for us. Nice. And then letting that go, gently coming back through center. Drawing both knees in toward the chest, maybe rocking a little bit from side to side. And then from here, let's draw the knees wide outside of the abdomen, outside of the belly, and flex the feet. Now from here, you might like to stay here holding your shins with the flexed feet. If you'd like to experiment with a different version of this posture, you might reach between the knees and grab the outside of the feet for happy baby pose. You might straighten one leg and then the other. Just sort of play around with this a little bit. The common element is that the knees are framing the belly, giving our belly plenty of room to breathe here. Breathing deeply, breathing into those sticky spots that you find. Nice. And now let's hug the knees into the chest. Drop the feet to the mat. Let our knees fall open. Bring the soles of the feet to touch. And from here, we can bring the hands to rest on the body or outstretch the arms beside us. I invite you to take a moment to rest here on the mat, whether it's in this reclined bound angle posture or if you'd like to extend the legs out long, that's also a wonderful option. We just like to take a moment or two at the end of our practice together each time to allow our nervous system to process, to digest, to integrate the work that we've done on the mat, the work of bringing our attention into the body, bringing our attention to the breath throughout this moving meditation. Feeling the air as it fills the lungs. Feeling the temperature of the air on your skin. Feeling the heaviness of your body on the mat, on the floor. Fully supported right here in this moment. We don't get a lot of times in our lives when we get to feel fully supported, so let's treasure it here for a moment. Softening the jaw, relaxing the belly, softening the hands and softening the feet. Letting the breath slow down, letting the breath deepen. Sending that breath deep to the bottom of the lungs, maybe even past the bottom of the lungs, deep into the belly. Can you slow down your exhale even more? And now we'll prepare to gently transition out of our practice and into the rest of our afternoon. Let's awaken gently through the fingers and the toes. Maybe stretch the arms and the legs long on the mat. And then very gently, with care, mindfully turning to one side and taking just a moment here in this sort of fetal position to savor the transition, a liminal space we don't often get to inhabit, at least not with intention. And then as you're ready, we'll gently press up into a seated position. And just take a moment here in this new orientation to breathe. to feel the body, to feel how the body is doing in this moment after spending a little bit of time caring for it gently and with intention. Thank you so much for joining me for today's practice. I hope to see you again next time, and I'm wishing you a wonderful weekend. Take such good care.